Let's be honest, the world feels pretty chaotic right now, right? Almost unpredictable. But what if I told you that what we're seeing isn't really chaos at all? What if it's a huge, long overdue correction to the way the world works? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into today. First things first, you got to forget everything you thought you knew about global power. The very nature of conflict has changed, fundamentally. The opening shots of the next great showdown, they aren't going to be loud. In fact, they're silent. And they've already been fired. That's right. The modern battlefield is completely economic. It's not fought in trenches with soldiers. It's fought in trade negotiations, in the tiny print of debt contracts, and in who controls the critical supply lines that, let's face it, power our entire world. So that begs the real question. Is all this disruption we're feeling just the result of one leader being impulsive? Or is it something way deeper? Maybe the final defensive gasp of an entire system that's under enormous stress.
The easy answer, the one you hear on the news pretty much every night, is that this is all driven by personality. The thinking goes that one leader is just ripping up the old rulebook, scaring allies, and generally causing a mess.
And that narrative is kind of comforting, isn't it? It suggests all this is just temporary, that if you just change the person at the top, the whole system will just snap right back to normal. But here's the thing. What if that basic assumption is completely and totally wrong? And this, right here, gets to the absolute heart of it. What we're witnessing isn't some new chaos being whipped up out of nowhere. No. It's the West, finally, and very late to the party, waking up to a world that other powers have already been busy reshaping for years. The former governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, he gave us the perfect word for this moment: a rupture. It's not a total collapse, not yet anyway. The buildings are still standing, the meetings are still happening, but the fundamental belief in the system, that's gone. Let's break that down. A transition implies a smooth road, right? A predictable path from A to B. But a rupture, that's a sharp, jarring psychological break. The engine of the global system might still be humming, but nobody really trusts that it's going to get us where we need to go anymore. So how on earth did we get here? Well, this didn't just start with the latest election cycle. It really began when huge parts of the world decided, you know what, being dependent on one single US-led system comes with political strings attached, and they didn't want to accept them anymore. For years, nations like Russia, China, and the other BRICS countries have been quietly building a whole alternative set of financial pipes. We're talking their own trade deals, new ways to settle payments that completely bypass the US dollar, and new alliances that don't need a thumbs up from Washington. And this context is absolutely crucial. It's why America's recent actions aren't actually revolutionary at all. They're defensive. The US is basically repricing its global relationships. Access to its markets, its money, its security, it's no longer a given. It's now conditional. So all of this creates a brand new kind of battlefield. It's a place where leverage is more important than old-school diplomacy and where the weapons of choice look very, very different. Yeah, the weapons today are tariffs, their control over critical infrastructure, like those undersea cables that carry literally all of our data, and it's the power to turn the flow of money on or off like a tap. These are the arteries of the modern economy, and they are way more vulnerable than most of us realize. Just think about that bizarre story about buying Greenland. It was treated like a joke, a spectacle. But if you look closer, it was never really about planting a flag. It was about controlling the supply of rare earth minerals. These are the elements you absolutely need for defense tech and green energy. And guess what? Their supply chain is dominated by China and Russia. Hey, just a quick pause here. If you're finding this analysis useful, and I really hope you are, do us a quick favor. Hit that like button, share this with someone, and definitely subscribe so you don't miss out on what we break down next. Okay, so all this geopolitical tension is obviously sending shockwaves through financial markets. And one of the best barometers for this is the price of gold. But the reason it's rising probably isn't the one you think. See, the surge in gold isn't about widespread panic. It's actually a cold, calculated, rational response by the world's biggest players. They are simply reevaluating risk in a new world where trust is no longer a given and where money itself has become a tool of foreign policy. I mean, just look at what the central banks are doing. They're not buying tons of gold because of some dusty old ideology, and they're not panicking. They're buying it because it's the pragmatic thing to do. It's a smart, defensive move when the entire system is experiencing a fundamental rupture. Because here is the unique, almost magical quality of gold. It is no one else's liability. It isn't a promise to pay from a government that might change its mind. And in a world where financial promises, debt, are being weaponized, owning something that stands completely on its own is the ultimate insurance policy.
So, what does this all mean for the rest of us? Well, the key takeaway isn't to panic buy gold bars. It's to practice a kind of financial sobriety. It's about really understanding the new rules of a very, very different game.
Think about it like this. Modern finance is built on a giant stack of promises. Your bank balance is a promise from the bank. Your bonds are a promise from a government or company. They're all claims on a system that only works as long as everyone trusts it. A hard asset, like physical gold, is different. Its value doesn't depend on anyone's goodwill.
You don't really notice the difference when times are calm and everything's going smoothly. But when the system comes under stress, that's when the distinction between owning a simple promise and owning a real physical asset becomes blindingly clear and incredibly important. And that brings us to the final question we have to ask ourselves. The old system, for all its flaws, was built on a foundation of trust. As that trust gets repriced, as it becomes conditional, everything changes. So I'll leave you with this. When trust itself becomes the price of admission, what are you willing to pay for real safety?